And it is 12:01, so we will go ahead and get started. We have one of our panelists was having some issues with technology, but I think she is in here. So, um, Leslie, if you can make her, hi Paula, if you can make her a spotlight, that would be great. But so today, my name is Angela, and I'm the state's advocacy manager. And today we're going to talk about training the advocate, empowerment exchange, igniting passion and purpose, volunteer trailblazers. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because we have so many people that want to volunteer with Compassion and Choices, and we do have our national volunteer program manager, AJ. But I know it can be a little bit difficult since we're a national nonprofit and we only have one office in Washington, D.C. So I wanted to bring together some of our volunteers who are doing amazing work in their community. So you can learn from them, learn how they've harnessed their own skills to go out in the community and do this and why they're passionate about it. Can you do next slide, Nico? So during the presentation portion of this, please keep your self-muted and your cell phones on silence, and then afterwards we will have time for Q&A. Next slide. So again, just want to touch on our mission statement. So Compassion and Choices improves care, expands options, and empowers everyone to chart their end-of-life journey. And I'm just going to go ahead and hop right into the panel discussion so we have enough time to get through everything. So I want to introduce our panelists. We have, if you guys each wave when I call your name, we have Marcia Sloan from California, Mitz from San Diego, California, Rhonda is from Michigan, and Carol is from Colorado. And somewhere, I think Ashley's having some technical issues, I think, going on there in Florida. But if we can find her again, oh, I see her. There, we got her now. Ashley from Florida. Last but definitely not least. So I'm going to just go ahead and get started asking questions. So if all of you can go around, Marcia, starting with you, can you share why you decided to volunteer with Compassion and Choices?
Sure. I became a volunteer with Compassion and Choices because of my experience when my mom died. My mom didn't want to continue living if her physical and mental capabilities became too compromised. And she gave a great deal of thought over a number of years about how she wanted to die. And finally arrived at the decision that when she felt it was time, she would voluntarily stop eating and drinking. And she had no terminal illness or life-threatening health problems. But when she was 98, she decided it was time, and we began to prepare for her death. We set her date for 3 months down the road for when she would start voluntarily stop eating and drinking. And from when she had made her decision, she had 3 months then to get her affairs in order. And I was involved in her end-of-life preparations from that point on. But it really wasn't until the week she actually stopped eating and drinking and died in a week, with my husband and me as her caregivers, that the full impact of the wisdom of her preparation hit me. She planned her death in the same way she had planned her life, and she pulled it off as planned. She treated her death as one of life's adventures. And she reported throughout that week her physical and mental experiences to us during her dying process. And she died peacefully. So being part of that process was very eye-opening for me. And it made me realize that I want to start thinking about my death in advance like she did, so I will be prepared. And I kept a journal of that last week of my mother's VSED, of her voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. And because she had supported Compassion and Choices and utilized their resources, I contacted Compassion and Choices and ended up becoming a storyteller, which has enabled me to continue to share my experience with others and learn more about all end of life options. Thanks.
Thanks, Marcia. Mitz, can you share why you became a volunteer for Compassion and Choices?
Sure, Angela. I'm a retired family practice physician. And actually, even during my internship and residency, it was clear, at least it seemed to me, that dying patients were not being treated well. And I have to say this is before all the law changes, et cetera. So I then read Derek Humphrey's book, Gene's Way, and thought, okay, he's starting this Hemlock Society to kind of destigmatize those that choose to control their end of life. So I was involved with that efforts in California to try to pass a law. Didn't succeed. Oregon passed a law. Hemlock has been changed to Compassion and Choices, so it's still an area that I have a lot of passion for from going way back.
Thanks, Mitz. Kara?
Okay, so my background's in social work. I worked in healthcare as a social worker and physical medicine rehab, and then went in a completely different direction, but still in healthcare into information technology. But my whole work career, I really took my job seriously. I felt like I made a difference, and I was passionate about the job that I did. So when it comes time to retire, then you're like, okay, so now who am I and what do I do? And it was about a couple of years later that Colorado was making the effort, along with Compassion and Choices, to get the medical aid in dying law passed through a vote of the people. And I started from the beginning of that, and I was very supportive and passionate about it because I feel like we should have a choice. And did everything from getting petitions signed to taking with a group from Denver the petitions to the Secretary of State's office to say so there, because our legislature would not vote for it two different times. They did not vote for it. And so it was like, now the people are going to speak. And we were successful in getting more than enough signatures. We went to a vote of the people, and 65% of the people of Colorado said, yes, I want this to be our law. And ever since then, it was like, yay, great, we have a law. It doesn't mean anything until people know about it, and until people know how to find out about it and be educated about it. So that was 2016. The beginning of 2017, the journey began to educate the public, educate the hospices, the medical folks, and it's a never-ending battle. And I've talked to people almost on a fairly regular basis that say, oh, I heard about that, I didn't know it passed. So it's a never-ending effort to get the word out there and make sure people understand what their rights are.
Thanks, Carol. Rhonda, same question. Oops, you're on mute.
I lead all kinds of Zoom meetings, and I'm always saying, you're on mute. No, I didn't. I lost my beautiful mother on December 13th, 2022, and she died of pancreatic cancer at age 87. So whenever I do these talks about my mom, there's so much I want to say, but of course there isn't time to do that. But she lived her life courageously, and she faced her illness courageously too, and her death. So what I will do is I'll share two things that made me really sad about her death and how that led me to Compassion and Choices. She suffered a lot through her illness, but so much and so unnecessarily during the last 2 weeks of her 5 weeks on home hospice. And then the second thing is, it did not have to be that way. My parents moved from Michigan to California about 20 years ago. And midway through her time in home hospice, where my sister and I were caring for her, we, my family of transplanted Michiganders, heard on a television talk show that California had a medical death in dying law. Apparently, California hospitals and hospice nurses are forbidden to bring up medical aid in dying to their patients. So it reminds me of what you just said, Carol, about people not knowing. My mother, when we heard about it and I talked with my mom, she really wanted this option. But unfortunately, by the time we knew, it was too late. If we had been aware of the possibility, my mom would have received the necessary prescription and had been able to choose her time of death. The whole family could have been with her, surrounding her in her bed, and each of us letting her know how much we loved her as she transitioned into whatever came next. So I'm working with Compassion and Choices because I don't want other people to suffer needlessly like my mother did. And I don't want other families to witness loved ones in such a profound state of suffering. And I want Michigan, where my husband and I still live, to offer a humane, safe option for death so that when the time comes for us, we have autonomy and compassionate options.
Thank you. Ashley, same question.
Yes. So my background, I am an end-of-life doula, and I've had over a decade in end-of-life and death care. So what brought me to Compassion and Choices was definitely the advocating for individual autonomy and choice at end of life. I believe in the importance of ensuring that everyone has access to comprehensive information and support regarding their end of life options, not just pertaining around medical aid and dying, but exploring all of the options, especially that Compassion and Choices um, educates everyone on. So also I want to recognize the mission in promoting the dignity and compassion when it comes to end of life is a real sticking point of why I aligned myself to Compassion and Choices.
Thank you so much, Ashley. So, Marcia, so I do want to highlight, I tried to select volunteers who were doing amazing work that could probably resonate with all of our other people who are interested in volunteering. So, Marcia, she has been a lone volunteer up in Northern California. She's past San Francisco and more of a rural part of California. She's been looking for other volunteers in her area, but has been doing amazing work by herself. Can you share with us, Marcia, about the impact that you've been able to make in your community?
Sure. Well, I continue to share my mom's story in person or on Zoom, or sending the link to the journal, to the journal I did about her VSED week that's on the Compassion and Choices website, to my friends, to the friends and relatives of my friends who are dealing with death issues, to grief groups, doctors, health centers, cancer support centers, anyone for whom this story may have relevance and interest. And in a small community, people reach out simply through word of mouth. And I also share Compassion and Choices End of Life Toolkit and other resources to the people that I may be speaking with. I also volunteered for the Compassion and Choices Hospice Outreach Project, where the volunteers collected information about hospices throughout California and what end-of-life options these different hospices support. And for that project, I contacted the hospices in my county, which gave me the opportunity to learn more about what end-of-life support services are available here. And that then prompted me to speak with my doctor to find out about doctors in our county who support medical aid in dying, all toward helping ensure that the people of our community have the support they need for making their choice about their end of life journey. And I've also presented on a number of compassion and choice webinars and Zoom sessions, which gets me to digest information about end of life options more deeply so I can put that information in my own words. So I think I've ended up absorbing and retaining more information, which makes it easier to speak on the subject with other people. Thanks.
Thanks, Marcia. I'm just going to add to that too. Because I could probably gloat about Marcia all day long. She's so wonderful. And many of you may know her from being a storyteller and presenting about voluntary stop eating and drinking. But recently, too, she had asked her doctor and found out her doctor would prescribe medical aid in dying. But her doctor, sometimes doctors don't want that out in the community. Like they don't want to like just broadcast it everywhere because they don't want people just coming to them for that. But you know, people do struggle to find doctors that will support them in whatever end of life option they choose. And so Marcia's doctor said, well, if you find somebody who's struggling, you can give them my name, but like I don't want my name on a website someplace. And so Marcia also stepped up and we've connected her with the local California group. So if somebody is struggling in that area, they'll connect them with Marcia, who will connect them to the doctors and the hospices. So we just appreciate Marcia so much and everything she does. We have volunteers all over the country tell me that she inspires them every time she shares her story about her mom. So thank you, Marcia. Mitz. I want to talk to you about two different things. So Mitz, you help us a lot. You go out and you table at different community events. Can you tell us how you find these tabling opportunities and how you also work with volunteering with other volunteers in San Diego?
Sure, Angela. By the way, I'm going to segue to Marcia's comment, or this whole comment about voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. I was thinking, just to share with you, that terminal fasting maybe has some other nuances to it that might be something to consider. Anyway, the question was regarding tabling. So Balboa Park is downtown, and you get there early, set up your own table, and engage with people going by. Some of the shopping centers, they have a public relations office in UTC or University Town Center. I complete the form and say, gee, I'd like to have a table, and they say, okay, you know, you're not selling any stuff. So there, and then the airport, one of our Compassion Choices volunteers in San Diego says, gee, she directs the people that are at the airport, and we agree to set up a table there. And then we hear about different other opportunities. So it's catch as catch can, and it's been good. There are, again, a fair number of volunteers in San Diego. So contacting CNC volunteers has made it also a good way, as you spend the day or half the day, you get to get friendships and bonding with other CNC volunteers. So it's been very good. Okay, that I think that answers the first question.
It does. And I just want to point out the one tabling event on the left is, I believe that's Pride, San Diego Pride, right?
Yes,
And
that's
then-
correct. Right. And the Pride event's got thousands of people. It's just,
That's a really great opportunity. And I just wanted to highlight kind of and show pictures, because sometimes we get questions about like, what do you mean when you say tabling? Which I'll go into, some other volunteers will also explain that too. But it's one of the reasons I wanted to show you what it looks like, as well as hear from the volunteers themselves. So Mitz, I actually wanted to invite you more to talk about the Death Talk. So if you can go into that and how you set that up and how you run your Death Talks.
sure. So the Death Talk meetups was a spinoff from the Death Cafes, and I've been hosting Death Cafes in San Diego face-to-face. Then with the pandemic, moved them to virtual. But the rules of the Death Cafes is that there's no agenda. And I wanted an agenda, so I went to the meetup place and submitted a application saying, I'd like to start a death talk meetup. I also started a bare bones book club, but who reads, well, the bare bones book club didn't have that much traction, but the death talk meetups provide the opportunity for someone with some experience or knowledge in this whole area to talk briefly in a kind of a informal sort of way. So we started actually with several hospices talking about, and I had a kind of a set of questions, what are you nonprofit, profit? What do you offer? Then we've moved on as people say, bring up questions. We have the medical school talk about their body donation program. We had the county office for, well, anyway, do we have a potter's field or a pauper's field for very indigent or homeless people? And so, there have been a variety of topics. And again, with my medical community context, I had a fair number of geriatricians and hospice docs and others be involved with those death talk meetups. I now have 800 people as members of the San Diego Death Talk meetup.
Thanks, Mitz. And I attend them occasionally if I have time, and I always learn from them. So I appreciate you doing those as well. I think Marcia's attended some too. So Carol, I also wanted to move on to you next because I used to oversee Colorado, so that's how I know Carol. And Carol is like the master of finding tabling opportunities and networking at these events. And I know that you also find a lot of opportunities to go give presentations while you're at tabling events. So can you share with us, how do you find these tabling events and what do you do when you're out tabling?
Okay, so the ones that you have the pictures of, one of them is was actually at the Alzheimer's Walk. And then the other one was at a senior event that was in Colorado Springs. It's hard to get started at first because you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what's out there. But, there's organizations. We have Silver Key. We have a lifelong learning. Ours is called Pillar. It's called Different Things in Different Communities. And just trying to come up, I spoke at the Latino luncheon one year. I just ask around, and at the tabling events, the last one that I went, one of the last ones I went to, I was asked by a person in charge of education for the Pikes Peak Library group. And we have several libraries throughout our community. And they want me to do an event once a month at different libraries, and it's going to be the same thing. But I was there, I got talking to somebody who was also tabling, and it turned into a series of presentations that I'm going to get to give. Also, the person in charge of Pillar, which was that lifelong learning association, she said, hey, you haven't been to see us for a while. Why don't you come and do a presentation again? So I also meet people who, maybe one particular woman was stage 4 metastatic breast cancer in remission, trying to find a doctor who would work with her. Kept in touch with her over the last year. She stayed in remission, doing quite well, and has finally been able to hook up with a doctor that is willing to write. And every time I do a presentation to any group, I just say, while you're well, before you need it, you need to ask your doctor, if I were terminally ill and had 6 months or less to live, would you write a prescription for me to take medication to end my suffering at the time that I chose? And if they say no, which we have a Catholic system in our community that's not allowed to do that, then you might want to look for a new doctor, because you don't want to be at that point where you got that horrible diagnosis and you're already, your doctor says, oh no, I won't do that. And you got to find a new doctor. So I always tell people, be prepared for this. It could happen. And the other thing too, that has been really big for me, because it started out as all, about the medical aid and dying law that we passed in Colorado, but all the other tools that Compassion and Choices has, the dementia addendum is really so important to me. I lost my mother-in-law last year to Alzheimer's, and she wasn't even hardly a person anymore. And so it's so important for me to get that document out to people in the community and say, fill it out now while you're still able to say what you would want in the event that you had dementia, Alzheimer's, or could not speak for yourself. And I learned this from Diane Rehm, who did a special on PBS about end of life. Have somebody in your family take their phone and video you explaining what you want and how you want your wishes to be honored. Because families can argue and say, I don't care what that piece of paper says. I know what mom wanted. And it can cause all kinds of problems. But if they see you on the little screen speaking, it's pretty strong information, and it's a lot harder to argue about when you see that person saying from themselves. So tabling, yeah, it's senior events, a health fair, and from the health fair in Manitou last year, I ended up doing a presentation for the Kiwanis Club in Manitou. So, I mean, it's like you never know wherever you are what your next opportunity is going to be, but the more you get out there, the more you have opportunity to get out there. So got to start somewhere.
Thanks, Carol. Mitz, I see your hand raised.
Sure. Again, Carol, that reminds me that, this tabling, one always connects with other tablers to make those connections. And that's so important. At one of the events I was at, I met this physical therapist who's finding a niche of doing physical therapy for hospice patients. And that led to him giving a talk at one of my Death Talk meetups.
I remember I was at that one. Marcia and Carol, just to ask you, so if you are in, and I can't list off all the states that I cover because there's too many, there's like 25 states plus California, but Marcia and Carol, when I used to oversee Colorado, what I will do is I'll try to have like a monthly or bi-monthly Zoom meeting that volunteers can drop in and just connect. Can you tell me, because I know both of you come to those a lot, what benefit do you get from that?
I can tell you that it's been really a great support system. You get to know the other volunteers. I'm in Colorado Springs, and there's one other volunteer. Well, she started as a volunteer. Now she works for CNC down here. So to have the support of the other people around the state to learn the things that they're doing can give you ideas of things you might want to do. And right now, Colorado is doing every 2 weeks because we have a bill pending in the legislation that just went through the Senate. It came from a Senate subcommittee and on through the Senate floor, and next it's going to be House of Representatives that will amend our end of life options law to include nurse practitioners to be able to write orders for patients, because it sounds like California is the same. A lot of rural areas, and maybe the providers there are nurse practitioners, that there isn't a physician located there. And also to shorten the waiting period from 15 days. We started out asking for less, but get down to 7, which is less than half the waiting time. So we're pretty tight right now, meeting every 2 weeks just to keep up to date what's going on with that. And I got to go to the state legislature, to the subcommittee, never had been in our capital before. And it was a really exciting thing to be able to be part of. It just really motivates me to, keep after it and keep doing it.
Thanks, Carol. And Marcia?
Yeah, I agree totally with what Carol has said, that it's great to hear what other volunteers are doing. So many new ideas about things I might want to pursue. And just like today, it's so great to hear what the rest, everyone else on our panel has to say and is doing, and because that gives me ideas and inspiration as well. So not having people so much in my own area, I just appreciate that there's a group to check in with on a monthly basis.
Thanks. So Rhonda, you came up with a really out-of-the-box idea. Can you share with us how you utilized your skill set that you already had to help expand the mission and educate others?
Sure. So our very first CNC Michigan Action Group started just in May 2023. So we are less than a year old. And my husband and I have been active since its formation. As I mentioned, my mother died not long before the group formed, and that was my motivation to find a group and get involved. So at our very first meeting, we were encouraged to think about our circles of influence and who we might reach out to let them know about CNC and its mission and its work. Just a little bit about my background. I'm a clinical psychologist and a yoga teacher, and I've been teaching yoga in the Detroit area for almost 20 years now. So I have a bit of a yoga following. Well, in 2017, I organized and led monthly donation yoga classes to raise money for organizations that protected the civil rights of marginalized people and protected the environment. My husband, Mike, who you'll see on guitar, plays guitar and sings, and he occasionally would provide live music for my yoga classes. So we often teamed up on these fundraising activities. But when we were asked who we might contact to spread the word about CNC and medical aid in dying, it clicked that I could offer a donation yoga class for CNC. And the idea of a yoga benefit with live music had three elements that were really important to me. One, it would raise awareness in Michigan. And of course, being new in Michigan, this was really important. It was a good fundraising opportunity. And third, it would be fun. So there was also the advantage that summer was right around the corner and we could meet in my backyard. So there was no need to rent studio space. Now, my neighborhood happened to be built in the middle of a pine forest, which you can probably tell a little bit from the pictures. So I called the event Yoga in the Pines. And to set up for it, there's an Einstein Bagels near my house that historically would give me free day-old bagels for my fundraisers. So I picked up some cream cheese and iced tea and set the bagels and the cream cheese and the iced tea out on a table that had lots of CNC literature and swag. And I scheduled the event for a Sunday in July, and we ended up with a really beautiful day. You can probably tell that from the pictures. There were about 25 people that attended, and we raised over $1,000. Dorothy, our Michigan Volunteer Action team leader, and I spent about 20 minutes after the yoga class talking about CNC, its mission, what was going on, and particularly the questions tended to be focused on medical aid in dying. So that event for me really was the first pebble in the pond. One of my friends that attended and did yoga with us is very active in local Democratic politics. So she arranged for us to speak at a local Democratic club. And then I started hearing buzz around my yoga studio from my students that attended, and I was able to be an informational resource for them. And then legislation was actually introduced in Michigan, unknown to CNC at the time. It came from another source. But I first heard about it from a woman who attended my event and is also a reporter for Detroit's largest newspaper. So through that event, I now have a media contact. And moving forward, my plan is to offer a CNC Yoga in the Pines every summer.
Thanks so much. I love that you did that. And when you sent me the photos, I just have to add, I am a former Michigander, and it just reminded me of my old backyard. And I now live in Phoenix, Arizona, and it really made me miss all the greenery.
Right, it's very green. And I'll just say one more comment about the pictures. The picture of me next to the two pictures on the wall, the top one is my mom. And 10 days after my mom passed, my husband's mom passed. So that's her picture. So yeah, it's really a dear event to us. Thanks.
Thank you so much for doing that. I don't oversee Michigan, and I wish I did. But then when they told me that you did this, I was so excited. So Ashley, again, last but not least, I loved this photo when I got this tabling. But you also have been engaged. You're a newer CNC volunteer, but have really gotten involved and have been also doing some out of the box stuff as far as where you're going out and tabling and trying to reach people. Can you share about that?
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. So tabling and preparing for a successful table event is actually very crucial. So thank you for asking about that. I'm a firm believer of strategic planning. Making the most out of our time is essential. So I will often say time is a commodity. And just me saying that, I want to thank each and every one of you, even the panelists here, for creating a space for us having this type of conversation. One of the first things that I do when it comes to tabling is to assess the space where I feel comfortable. It's actually very essential to be in an environment that resonates with my spirit and values, because I want to be fully engaged and connect with the attendees. Another thing for me is that I'm a part of the sandwich generation. So I often gravitate towards events or that cater towards caregivers or families with children. And those communities provide support within those communities. Actually, recently I've been exploring the opportunities to participate at art and wine walks, because they offer a relaxed atmosphere where attendees can find meaningful conversations about end of life. So just thinking outside of the box when it comes to the narrative of having these conversations. So of course, I've been a part of general community events, which is one shown here with Daisy and myself. But I want people to remember that the world is our oyster. So to be creative within your own comfort level, because you don't have to be defined to like a hospice or a palliative care or 55 plus aging community. For me, it's dabbling into creative spaces of 5Ks or art and wine walks, pride events. Orlando, we have a huge come out with pride event that is something for me that we need to have these conversations. We still need to have these conversations, but I won't negate going to wellness events or festivals as long as they align with the mission, vision, and value with Compassionate Choices.
And then you're also, Ashley, part of our African American Leadership Council. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? That's part of the other picture up here.
Oh, yes, please. Okay, so first and foremost, when it comes to, I want to encourage new volunteers to engage and embrace Compassionate Choices. Please have that spirit of curiosity and never hesitate to reach out and ask for help and questions. The picture that is shown here, I am actually had the privilege and will have the privilege to connect with Compassionate Choices African American Leadership Council. And with that, I'm able to fellowship, I'm able to engage. We have think tanks, share some ideas, what's working within their community, what's not. And it all around, it creates a supportive environment. So if I was to give advice to new volunteers, I would empower them to actually embrace Compassionate Choices, because it's a treasure trove of resources, from the wealth of information that's on the website to the insightful booklets that we talked about earlier. There's a plethora of information at our fingertips. And let's not forget our local advisory team that is, within your area, or the volunteer coordinator, or for ideas, or, reaching out to, I've reached out to Megan, who is with education and a program manager, for also connecting with Randy Alexander, who's the Chief Engagement Officer at Compassionate Choices, to really connect and get that outreach to diverse populations. And it provides me guidance so I can really be impactful in connecting with the communities about the mission, vision, and values and resources that Compassionate Choices offers.
Thanks so much, Ashley. And we are having a webinar in April with some of our community engagement team is going to join me to share about how community engagement can be a resource for volunteers as well. Rhonda, can you share also what is your advice for new volunteers?
Yeah. So the very first thing I did, even before I did yoga in the Pines, was become a storyteller. So if you have a story to tell, I think it's a great thing to do, not only because our stories move us, but because it helps you work with CNC has a professional writer that talks to you. So you're not actually doing the writing, you're in conversation. And that was really helpful for me in formulating my story because there were so many thought bubbles and so much emotion in my head that to have somebody who wrote well, put it together, has served me well as I've gone on and done other storytelling to other groups. I think saying yes is a really good idea. So if there's tabling events around you, just say yes. I've tabled at a farmer's market. We had a table at our Pride event. I wasn't able to go to that, but it's been interesting for me to listen to the other volunteers and think about the things that they've done. And yeah, and then keep in touch with the offerings from CNC. Just today, I got an email about clinical engagement and education, which I did not know existed. But I thought as a clinician, as a clinical psychologist, that there might be a way I can contribute. So really staying up on what's going on.
Thanks so much, Rhonda. And Marsha, do you have any advice for any new volunteers?
Yeah, thinking about that question made me think about my learning process over the past 2 years. And what I suggest is taking your time and, doing really what feels right for you. Figuring out what I want to do is an kind of slow unfolding process. And I've been through the Train the Advocate series twice. And the longer I live with the information presented by Compassion and Choices, the more natural it starts to feel to share it. And I still haven't had a table at a local farmer's market, but at least I can now more easily imagine having a conversation with someone I don't know about death and end of life options. And I feel less like I have to have all the answers. And I'm way more curious about where other people are coming from. So I think there's a greater chance I could actually have a conversation as opposed to, feel like I'm supposed to, just be lecturing or giving out information without listening to people. So as volunteers, we don't always have the answers to people's questions, and that's okay. And some people will feel angry or threatened by the topic of end of life options. But, I know I've watched you, Angela, beautifully model how we're not really here to actively challenge deep-seated feelings or convince people who feel uncomfortable or threatened out of their own comfort zone. And we're really more of a resource, and we can plant a seed and begin what down the line might become a conversation for someone else. And people's difficult questions or reactions that could be, certainly uncomfortable for me to have to deal with in a conversation, but they're a huge teacher for how we can continue to have more fruitful conversations with others going on about end of life issues. Another question I've been asked that has helped me in my volunteering is, what draws me to this work? What part of this big topic of death inspires me to continue learning? And I think asking ourselves that question and pursuing what grabs us about this work helps us find our story, the story that we want to tell, and it sustains our commitment and encourages others to tell their stories as well. And I just want to say to everyone who's here, appreciate that you're interested. You know, don't take it for granted. You know, the fact that we took a Train the Advocate training, you know, not everyone is doing this. And thinking about death and dealing with our death is actually an incredible way to connect with others in life. And I guess I just feel like I'm beginning to explore this after a couple of years. So I thank Compassion and Choices very, very much for this encouraging me in this journey.
Thanks, Marcia. And Mitz and Carol, you both have been with Compassion and Choices for a very long time. Nico, I got one last slide I want you to share, but Mitz, can you share with us just why you've stuck with CNC for so long?
You know, again, this is such an important area that needs more visibility, more attention. And I know what to say. It's something I've been involved with, and I appreciate the Compassion Choices resources and support. It's become a much larger organization than the little mom and pop Hemlock Society that I started with years ago, and has now you know, so many different resources. It's just been a win-win kind of situation where, again, your support for the meetups, sending materials for the tabling. The tablecloths are so professionally done. Just the big signages, people go by and they say, you know, Compassion Choices. Even if they don't come up to the table, it sparks a conversation, gets some visibility. It's great. So it's a two-way street, and I appreciate the opportunity to get the support that it provides.
Thanks. I kind of laughed because I put this up there because I love this photo of Carol. This is almost 10 years ago of Carol. And I saw Carol's reaction when she saw the slide. But Carol, you've been with us so long. Why do you stay with us?
Because I think just to go back, we lost a friend when we were in our 30s who had a heart attack playing tennis. And it was like the first time anyone we knew around our age died. And we were like, oh my God, you know, this can happen. And so we were living in Colorado Springs, around Manitou at the time, drove back to Grand Junction for his funeral, and then went to the burial at the cemetery. And as they lowered his casket into the ground, my husband said, please don't bury me in the ground. And I said, you know, that's a really good thing to know. And, you know, having conversations about death in your 30s is kind of unusual. And I was never afraid to talk about it, but it hadn't come up before. So I've always been comfortable with understanding what people want and honoring their wishes. And when I go and do tabling events, there was one that was a physician, it was the family practice physicians annual meeting here in Colorado Springs. And I asked a doctor who was coming by my table reading the material if he would write a prescription for his patient. He said, well, no, I wouldn't be able to do that. And I said, do you mind if I ask why? And he said, well, it's against my religious beliefs. And I said, oh, okay, I understand that. And I said, but what would you tell your patient? And he said, well, I would refer my patient to someone else in the practice that I knew was comfortable with it. And it was like, oh my God, you can't love anybody for being more honest, but being willing to not just give a roadblock to their patient and saying, no, absolutely not, that's wrong. He was open enough to go ahead and refer the patient on. But those kinds of things inspire me to continue, because like I say, in Colorado, at least in the area I live in, it's like the best kept secret. And I just really want people to know that don't wait till you're terminally ill to understand what your rights are and what is available to you, whether it's the dementia addendum, whether it's the VSED information, whatever information that CNC can provide to people is so important. And I don't think this job will ever be done. So I still have the ability to do it. And I'm thankful that it gives me something that I feel is important and gives me a sense of purpose, because I didn't just want to retire and do nothing. So it's been really good for me. And I feel like it's been good for the community of the people I've been able to reach, but there's a lot more out there that I'm still after. Got to keep going.
Thanks, Carol. Nico, you can stop sharing the slides. We're going to open it up for some questions. I just want to hit on what you said. I'm also a social worker, and Carol's a social worker. I saw we have another social worker in the chat box. But we often say in the social work field that our goal is to work ourselves out of a job, but it doesn't always happen, unfortunately. So I do want to take some questions. Hans, I see your hand raised. I got a question right before I go to you, Hans. But so one of the questions I got during this is that if someone had the opportunity to table at an event, how would they get the resources, table literature? Like, what does this look like? So I'm going to put in here a link. If you haven't already signed up to volunteer with CNC, when you sign up for it, every week, every Monday, we get a list of people who have signed up in the states that we cover. So I'm the state advocacy manager, Nico Wave, who you see. He's one of our organizers. But so each state will have an organizer and a manager. And so we'll get the list of everybody who's signing up to volunteer, and we'll connect with you. But in general, what the process looks like is that sometimes there's a fee for getting a table. So if you find a tabling event, you should get the information for it, send it to the organizer or the state manager, say like, oh, I found this tabling event. I think this would be a good opportunity. You know, if you agree and have the budget for it, can we look at tabling for this? And then we can work with you. It takes about 2 weeks to get you the materials that you order through us. And honestly, it comes a little sooner than that, but they tell us to tell everybody 2 weeks. Unfortunately, it's not something that the way it looks on our end is it's kind of like Amazon, but it's not, we have to go in and order it. So what I typically do is I'll try to like download the PDF so I can show the volunteers what's available. You can ask your manager or organizer for a welcome box, and they can send you kind of a sample of the materials that we have, and you can look at it and see which ones you like. And then we can send you a table cover. If you're not sure, like MITS does a lot of tabling. The table covers, you know, we're a nonprofit, so they cost about $250 for each table cover. So sometimes if you just want to like try it out, what we can do is send you like a cheaper table cover. And then if you decide, no, that's not really what I am into, but if you really get motivated to start doing tabling, we'll send you the actual table cover. So let me know, you guys can, I don't want to call out who asked me that, but if I didn't answer that clearly, if you want to take yourself off mute, the reason I set this up this way is so that we can have a conversation and you can ask questions. So let me know if I didn't answer that all the way for you. Hans.
So for the table class, I mean, 250, that's an awful lot of money. Is there no way just to borrow one and for $5 or $10 mail it back to you, Angela?
Yeah, it could. I don't know how much mailing stuff is. Typically what we will do is like MITS has a table cover, and other volunteers in San Diego who want to go table, if MITS isn't there, then he gives the tablecloth to them. Colorado kind of does similar stuff. So it's kind of like if we could do that. Hans, I don't know why I didn't think of that. That's why you're here. So yes, that's an option.
Okay, because I can see maybe in Utah I'll do 1 or 2 at the very most in the rest of the year. So I wouldn't want to go to that kind of cost for anybody. And Carol, you had 2 beautiful T-shirts on that picture, one yellow, one gray. Did you make those up yourself? Did you get them made up professionally? Where did they come from?
Compassionate Choices made all those T-shirts, and we wore those when we were taking our ballots to the Secretary of State's office.
Okay, so I just bought for I think $8 or $9 on Amazon a series of these transfers you can iron on T-shirts. So I just take the logo of Compassionate Choices and put my name and Southern Utah Advocate and iron those on, and one T-shirt is what, like $6 or $7, and a quarter of a sheet of this stuff. So for anyone that's interested in creating their own, for $8 or $9, you've got a professional looking T-shirt for public events.
Thanks, Hans. But thanks for bringing that up about mailing. Sometimes I forget about the post office in my world of running around. Also just want to clarify, because I got another question about the cost for the table. So we do have a budget. So everybody will have like a state budget that they're allowed to spend in their state. And so if you find a tabling event, send it the information. Usually there's like an application that you need to fill out. But you can just take the app, like, you know, what happens for me, what I am fine with is like, if you say like, hey, you know, San Diego Pride is having their Pride event and we want to have a table there. You know, Mitz can just send me the website link for it. And then I go on, I look at the application, I'll fill it out, and then I send it to our accounting department, who will then pay them. And typically a table will come, like the event themselves will have the table there. You just have to come in and put your table cover and materials. Every once in a while, I think San Diego Pride is weird like this. We have to go rent a table somewhere, but we make it work. We'll rent the table and stuff. But and then typically what they also want is like a certificate of insurance sometimes. And so Compassion and Choices has that, which is why we send it all to our accounting. So they pay the check and they send a certificate of insurance. So you just find the event, send it to us. You know, if we have the budget for it, we'll try to make it work. Talk to you about what materials you want at the event. We kind of will go through it with you. You know, if I know that you're presenting to, if you're tabling it, you know, to doctors, that might look different than the materials we would give you if you're tabling at Pride. So we'll kind of walk through that with you, and we take care of it on the back end.
Angela, I was also going to say that I've had instances where there's a lesser price for nonprofits. And also I had one that was done by the Gazette, our local paper, that wasn't filling up. So her price kept coming down, and it started out sort of high, but there's one that Silver Key does that is like $1,200 or something. And we aren't looking at it this year. So not going to happen.
Yes, all of the panelists, feel free to jump in too and just answer questions. Hans? I can't hear you, Hans, but it doesn't look like you're on mute.
So
there.
what about medical conferences, cancer conferences and things like that I attend? Has anyone experience of professional medical organizations, associations, academies, and putting a table up there?
Yes,
I've certainly,
Oh, go ahead.
no, I've certainly tabled at the Academy of Family Physicians here in San Diego. That's what comes on. I'm again a retired family physician. I think it's a matter of again approaching these groups. The Cancer Society or some of these other groups may say, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that," or "Sure."
You know, I'm a retired cancer researcher, and about 15,000 people show up at the annual Cancer Congress. That would be a perfect, probably the table would be quite expensive, but in terms of exposure and medical interest, I think that would be a good bang for the buck for me.
Yeah, we had another, well, she still is a volunteer. I just don't oversee Colorado anymore, but we had a volunteer in Colorado named Diane, and she was on the board for all the national ombudsmen. So ombudsmen, they will go into skilled living facilities and talk to people. They're the liaison basically between the community and the skilled living facility. But so she was able to get a table at their national conference because she sits on the board. It would have been super expensive, and she was able to get it for $500. And she was already on the board and going out there, so she just tabled in addition to it and gave out a bunch of resources and really went over afterwards with all the different ombudsmen that she met. did a training on our dementia tools with them so that they could go out into these communities and assisted living and share about the dementia tools. So yeah, it's really about your connections and who you know and where you feel comfortable going. As Ashley said, like, we want to make sure that you feel comfortable and you're not setting yourself up to feel, you know, like, oh, these people don't agree with me and I'm going to come here anyways. So Gina.
Hi, I'm in New York, and I'd love to know what's going on in New York, where I know we don't even have a medical aid in dying law. And I know that my assembly member is against it.
So Gina, I think I saw your comment in there and I responded to you. So New York has been trying to pass medical aid in dying for, this is their 9th year. And Corinne and Franny are your organizers there. So they, I mean, they have been doing so much. And so it looks different. Volunteering in a state looks different depending on where you are. So sometimes if we think that the state's going to be close, then they put a lot of resources into targeting legislators. So what they're doing in New York is, like, I feel like every week they have a day of action down at the Capitol. And they've done amazing stuff. Last year, they had a candlelight vigil for all of the people, all of the advocates who have advocated for this law to get passed over the past 8 years. For them who have died from their diseases while they were waiting for this law to get passed. And so they had it down at the state capitol. And it was really just, she did it to thank all the volunteers, for the legislators, to hear from these families that they're still here, they still want this law passed. They also did, I mean, they do a whole bunch of stuff. They do a lot of, like, very more in your face stuff with the legislators there, because they're really trying to pass this. So they really want to be seen down at the state capitol. But they also do education in the community. In a lot of the states that I cover, I know Hans because he's in Utah, and that's one of the states that I cover. They do not have any legislation introduced. And when they have had it in the past, it hasn't really gone far. So what we do is more just educating people, trying to get them information and informed about what's available to them. And even so, Ashley, I might call on you to talk about this a little bit. But, less than 1% of the people in states where medical aid in dying is authorized, people use medical aid in dying. So people are dying not using medical aid in dying. So while it is a great, something that a lot of people want to be authorized in their state, and people that choose this option feel such relief from it, there's so much work to be done around end of life in general. And Ashley's in Florida, so if you want to speak a little bit about that too.
Yeah, so mind you, I just took myself off a video. Hopefully I'm a little bit clearer and can be heard. But yes, there's so much around the end of life outside of medical aid in dying, because here in Florida, we have yet to have that bill passed. But we can educate in all options that are out there. And that's why, again, I love Compassion and Choices, that provides the information of the autonomy and options that our communities can be aware of, because they don't know what they don't know. And they don't know they don't know what to advocate or where to even start if they don't even know their options. So yes, when it does come to Florida, we are a work in progress. And not saying that we won't get there, but it's slow moving.
And Gina, I put the link in there just again now to volunteer for Compassion and Choices. So again, if you go up there and sign up, then your information will be sent to Corinne and Franny, and they'll follow up with you and get you connected with all the work that they're doing in New York. Hans.
Has anyone got any experience at all of lobbying or trying to work with a religious interfaith council in their regions? I do quite a lot through interfaith on education of various kinds. I'm very reluctant in Utah to bring this up. So any advice anybody has got, any experience would be welcome.
Yeah, I would like to add, I have yet I have not gone through that experience, but again, Compassionate Choices is a resource, and they actually have a whole area where there is staff that really plugs into faith and interfaith to help you approach organizations or religious entities to have these types of conversations.
And that's on the website?
Yes. Like
Oh.
look how excited I got, because again, I'm a melting pot here in Florida, and I often reach out to liaisons from Compassionate Choices and use them as a resource to approach faith-based ministries.
Okay, I'm going to have. Yes, go
Yes,
ahead.
Zena is the person that does our faith outreach, and she's going to be presenting on the community engagement one in April
Oh, good. All
that I was
right. Oh,
talking about. So,
great.
Yes,
Thank you.
Nina is amazing.
Mitzi, do you want to add to that?
I've spoken locally to the Interfaith Council. Again, it's been some years ago, and it reminds me I should go back and offer, because it's not one and done. But again, I had a person in that Interfaith Council who said, it's, I met with him, and it's important that we have that discussion. If you're willing to be to talk, we'll have this discussion. And it went very well, again, in terms of various faith leaders talking about how do we approach control around death and dying and suffering and all these sorts of existential or whatever's. So it was very good. I'll have to thanks for bringing that on. I've got an assignment.
Any other questions?
I think Diane did. Oh, yeah.
Diane?
You're on mute, Diane.
Okay, I'm new at this sort of. Mary Ann is on today too, and Nico, you could probably say something, but in Iowa, we're doing some webinars. We call them Finish Strong Iowa, and we just recently had one where we had 3 religious-based speakers present. The format was sort of where there were a number of thoughts that people have related to their religious perspectives, like suffering really has a place in all of this, and this really is murder. And so we had these individuals respond to those thoughts and share their perspective. I remember my minister in particular commented on how, well, he saw us as being co-creators with God. That I thought was a very helpful kind of scripting to talk about this, when some people believe that God's in charge. I have a sister who believes that God knows the last second that she will take her breath. So all kinds of conversations, and I think that may be available for people to watch. Am I right, Nico? Okay, if you want to say any more about that.
Yeah, just to continue what Diane said, it was really great, and Zena was actually part of that as well, just to kind of help guide the conversation or start the conversations if individuals themselves wanted to reach out to the faith leaders in their community. How do we go about talking about this or asking these questions? And I feel like it was just such a wonderful and informative way, and just to kind of keep an open mind as well. Like I forget who said it, but even when doing the Train the Advocates, we're trying to get people to be a little bit more informed, and not necessarily to do presentations and go into other communities or areas where we feel like there would be much opposition or hesitation with these types of conversations. But again, just to try to keep an open mind in how to approach them and hearing them out, and then the best way to follow up and in providing the information to them. So.
Any other questions or comments? Nothing, Jane?
I just didn't hear if Nico was going to send us the link to that Iowa presentation. I think that'd be so helpful to prepare. We're in South Carolina. Need I say more about different opinions about everything? So Nico, can you send a link to the Iowa presentation?
We can send it out. We'll have enough space in our email. We can send it out in the email follow
Right.
up.
Thank you. This has been very helpful. Very.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to pick on you, Jane. I just saw you. I was going through the Zooms. Are you talking, Carol? You're on mute.
I was at a shoe store one day and I started talking to the gentleman who was the owner, and he said something about his mother had died of cancer the previous year. And I told him that I volunteered for Compassion and Choices and how it allows people at the end of their life, or that are terminally ill, to choose how they want to die and or when. And he said, if God wants me to suffer, then I will suffer. And I said, okay, well, thank you. You have a nice day. And it took me about 2 years to go back there and look for shoes, because they do have comfortable shoes. But I will not ever argue with anyone who is, has their mind made up. And I've never had anybody, I was always prepared for if I was doing a presentation and somebody said, it's murder, or it's wrong or whatever. I was always ready to say, right now we're here to talk about this. I'd be glad to meet with you afterwards and talk with you about what your concerns are or your feelings are. I haven't had to do that yet, because actually most people that sign up for a presentation want to learn about it. But it's always interesting, because you never know the reaction you're going to get. But as long as you are prepared to respect other people's wishes, even if they're not the same as yours, it's not difficult. You just say, appreciate that, and you have a nice day. We can't convince everybody.
Okay, well, it's 1:12, and so I appreciate you all staying a little after to continue the conversation. I appreciate our volunteers for joining us today. I'm going to clap for you guys. Thank you so much for everything that you all do. So feel free to reach out to me if you have. Oh, thanks, Nico. I didn't know we could do that. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day. And if you celebrate St. Patrick's Day, I hope that it is good. I think wear your green so you don't get pinched. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.